very quickly went from 0 to 1 million streams and is still growing now. Wow.
Welcome to the DIY Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Nico Santana. This is brought to you by DistroKid. Get 7% off your yearly membership plan, distrokid.com/VIP/Nico Santana. Welcome to the DIY Artist Podcast. My name is Nico Santana. I am beyond ecstatic to be joined by someone I haven't personally met is in, the physical realm, but I've had the pleasure of speaking with via Zoom and on multiple occasions online. Will Hatton, everybody. This guy is a phenomenal producer, wise instructor, been in the music game doing all sorts of things from playing drums to producing his own tracks to breaking, in my personal opinion, records in the indie space, all while doing it on his own primarily. And of course, with collaborations and whatnot. Will Hatton, aka Hushchild, welcome to the DIY Artist Podcast, my man.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you, brother.
Yeah, likewise, brother. I've admired you from afar. I definitely admire you right now face to face. So it's just great to be able to be in this same space with you and kind of just talking about our journeys as DIY artists and producers in your case, right? One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on this podcast is you bring the perspective of somebody who's actually been in the actual instruction space. And of course, you've, if I'm understanding correctly, you've also toured as a drummer. Is that correct? Kind of talk to me a little bit about your background and where you are right now with your music.
Sure. How far back do you want to go?
Well, let's start with the present right now, and then we'll kind of dive back into like the early stages. So, like, what are you doing right now? And we'll go back to the early stages.
So right now, my main focus is education online. I'm hugely passionate about breaking down what could be considered larger concepts, musical concepts, and just breaking down the fundamental ideas so it's as widely accessible as possible. So weekly, I put out content on YouTube, electronic music production, but I don't like to give it a particular genre. We focus on the more chilled side of electronic, but sometimes we mix it up. And then outside of that, as you mentioned, also a session musician, from time to time, pandemic, depending. But also a session drummer and produce for a few different artists and live stream live electronic music as well.
And the way that Will and I got acquainted was through DistroKid, who I forgot to shout out in the beginning of this video. So, definitely want to give a shout out to DistroKid. We're both independent artists. We've both been using the service for some time now. By not only being sponsored by them, but by using their service, it's given us the opportunity to kind of level ourselves up as producers, as artists, to be able to reach mass audience really in the digital age, and just making things a lot more streamlined with being able to distribute our music without breaking the bank. So shouts out to DistroKid. I'm wearing their merch. I've seen Will wear their merch from time to time, so huge shouts out to them. And of course, we're happy to have them sponsor this podcast. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the beginnings here. So talk to me a little bit about how you got introduced to music, and where did the idea stem from that this is what you wanted to do with your life?
Oh, dude. So we're going back to the days of high school, and probably like every kid with, a mild form of ADHD, I tried everything. Tried all the sports, I couldn't get a net from the free throw line. I couldn't cross it into the goal when I was playing football. Was rubbish on the tennis court. So I find music, right? I hear the band room. And it was a tiny little cabin almost. Yeah, pretty underfunded school. Definitely no funding in the arts. It was this little cabin. There was always this noise coming from this room. And I tried bass, and I tried guitar, and I tried piano. Still the same results as I was getting in sports. But drums was one of the first things that I came to. And it was still difficult, and is still difficult to this day, but there was just something inside playing drums that I could figure out, okay, if I just hit this thing in time, then I'm keeping time on the hi-hat. And if I combine the kick drum, and it was kind of like driving a car, I got used to using, my different limbs at different times. and I could work it out. And then before long, I was, you know, starting a little band in high school, whatever. Fast forward, when I was in college, I took music, and there was a guy there that was like, I think he was a guest lecturer. I don't think he was a teacher. And his name was Richard Brown, and he was the musical director for the Lord of the Rings productions in London and New Zealand. And I really wanted to be a session drummer. By this point, I decided that I didn't want to be in a band and play the same 7 songs every night, you know, play all the different pubs and bars around the UK. I wanted to be a session musician. I wanted to travel around the country, if not overseas, playing for people last minute and feeling the stress of learning their set list within, you know, short notice. So I hit Richard Brown up, and of course he was like, absolutely not. No way. You know, I was a kid. He was like in his late 50s, whatever. He was well traveled, written loads of music. He was like, no way. So I, you know, kind of picked myself back up. I left it probably like another month. I hit him up again, another month, hit him up again. And I found out that his drummer was sick. He was doing a small orchestral performance for about 6 months, and his drummer got sick. Someone let me know. I hit him up and I said, I'll do whatever your drummer can do better, but for absolutely free. And one of those things were true. I would do it for free. I don't know if I would do it better, but I told him I would. And he gave me just like an audition, and he said I could come and play with the orchestra and whatever. And he kept me on for 6 months. And after he kept me on for 6 months, we did another show with a small orchestra. And that one, he like paid my travel. And that was when I was like, oh my God, I'm getting paid, or so I thought, you know, like I was getting my travel paid for. I'm doing this musician thing, and that was kind of the hook for it. It wasn't until many years later I played drums for you know, kind of unknown rising talent. I played drums for people that had won shows like The Voice and X Factor, and then a few, you know, like pop groups or pop artists and rock bands, and it wasn't until maybe 10 years later after that point that I decided to get into electronic music, and I started producing bits and pieces, and it was mainly from an aspect of playing drums. So when I was playing for an artist, they maybe needed a backing track, I would create that backing track, and then I slowly started to show more interest in that side of things, and I never really wanted to be famous, so it was kind of a nice sidestep to go into the studio and produce tracks and be behind the scenes for different artists. And then slowly after that, my own music came, you know, only in the last year or two.
One thing I admire about you is, in spite of the successes that I've seen online, you know, you carry a very down-to-earth attitude about you, and I think that at least to me speaks volumes, because you know, it's one of those things where I talked about it in the first podcast, but being a forever student, I think, requires a level of humility that oftentimes is unmatched. And I think where indie artists may have I want to say a roadblock or an obstacle is being afraid of those humble beginnings. You know, you talked about how you wanted to play for free and you weren't looking for fame. And, you know, two of the things that, you know, oftentimes are kind of enveloped in wanting to be an artist, at least, you know, I can't speak for your region, but in the States, you know, especially in Florida and South Florida at that, you know, when you think of the idea of becoming a rapper, you think of two things: money, right? And, public validation, fame. And I'm not saying you weren't wanting to make a living out of this, but at the same time, it just seems like your approach is very different than what would be the case for some back home. So, and by the way, where are you based out of? Because I don't think we established that at the beginning of the podcast.
So I'm about 45 minutes outside of London.
Okay.
I'm just on the coast, a little town called Southend-on-Sea. Not much goes on here, buddy. Awesome. It's a quiet little seaside town, but you know, it keeps me just a little bit connected to London without all the hustle and bustle and craziness.
Just goes to show we're fortunately worldwide because of the power of the internet now. So that's beautiful, man. Okay, so you started through playing drums, and then eventually you got into producing. For those who are looking to perhaps, like myself, really, I'm not a seasoned producer by any means. I've produced tracks on Logic here and there, but not anything that I would boast or claim. What would you recommend for upcoming producer or somebody who wants to get into production? Is it beneficial to start the traditional learn your instruments first, or are you okay with telling your students, hey, don't even worry about learning an instrument nowadays, just go ahead and jump into the first DAW that you could get your hands on, whether Ableton or not? What would you recommend?
I think that's such a vast question, and maybe if you ask me that question tomorrow, I might give you a different answer, and the same the following week. Sure. But I think today, really, if you can have some level of music theory. I don't have great music theory, but I know the C major scale. I know a few a couple of minor chord progressions. I think that's always going to help level up your skills, because at least your listening skills are like, okay, is this in key when I play this? Is there dissonance there? As long as you have some listening skills, I think that's beneficial. But ultimately, I think there's so many tools to help you get better at, production. And nowadays I consider production an instrument anyway. If you're good with the laptop, if you're good at sound selection, sound design, mixing, mastering, I consider you're good at your instrument. And I know that was something that maybe back 70s, 80s, 90s, even as close to the 2010s, laptop music or using the laptop as a tool for music was kind of frowned upon. Like, you don't really play a real instrument. You don't know. I've studied this thing in a garage for 20 years, whatever. Right. But I think if you're good with a tool, and that could be like the MPD or some kind of beat machine, something like that, I think your drive over time will allow you to be better at music. But I think if you have an instrument, for me it was drums, piano came later, that's definitely going to level up your skills in some regard, because you'll know where to travel with that instrument and to create a narrative with that instrument.
I appreciate you saying that, and I think that oftentimes there's kind of an imposter syndrome effect when it comes to production, because of the same things that you mentioned, right? 70s, 80s, that was the mentality. If you're not playing an instrument, it seemed like people frowned upon you. Whereas nowadays it's not so much the case, but even so, getting into music now and being in a room of very talented musicians, it can feel very overwhelming if you're not, at least if you don't have the basics of some sort of music theory, in your tool belt. But I'm glad you said that, man. So jumping back into, your story and going from session drummer to now you're jumping into the realm of production. Were you traveling full time as a musician, or were you kind of, going from gig to gig, still working part-time or full-time or what have you? And how did you get from that to, I guess, the next chapter in your music journey?
So the full-time music didn't come until a year ago, a year and a half ago, around the time that you and I met. And when I was straddling coming away from session musicianship as much, I still play drums and stuff, but when I was coming away from being a session musician, getting more into production, I was always a music lecturer. I worked at the college that I attended when I was a kid. So I was teaching music 5 days a week, and in the evenings or on breaks, I'd spend the lunch break like reading some sheet music or listening to an MP3 that a band had sent me, learning that. I'd be in a back room, kind of naughty to admit to it now, but it's college, they're older students, they've got coursework. I'd set them on a task, they would work away for an hour. I might spend 45 minutes in the laptop. I kind of peek my head up, meerkat around, everybody's good. Okay, I carry on making this beat, whatever, and share it with the class. And then I'd basically do, there was a period of time where I was doing like a 7-hour day job. And then I would travel into London and I would do 6-7 hours in London as well. And I worked in a studio for a time there with a couple of other producers. And that was where, like, it really hit the fan. I hit the ground running. I was probably a little bit out of my comfort zone. We've never discussed this, but I don't know how you work. I like to be a little bit on the edge of my comfort zone just to get a little bit of a push. Are you similar, buddy?
Yeah, I would say so.
When I worked at this music studio, it was already established. I was a latecomer. There was a couple of other producers there. They were very much in the rock world. I think there was a rock producer. He focused mainly on band recordings. There was another producer, maybe rock again, but it was more vocals and stuff. And I just happened to find that spot. You guys need a producer. I want to be a hip hop producer. And they were like, well, we don't really do that here. I was like, no, I'll make it work. So I was really struggling. Teaching 7 hours, I'd go to this studio and I would just be dishing out flyers on Facebook, on Instagram, just like if anybody wants to come through for a quick vocal session. And that's kind of where I started to at least again like prick my ears up and think I could probably do this full time, but let's just figure out how I'm gonna get all of the cogs spinning together, because I was really juggling plates at the time. And I continued down that road for a long time, and I would quit the studio. College was always there, and then I would focus on maybe selling beats online, and that would become overwhelming, and I'd go, again, quit that cold turkey and just focus on teaching at the studio. And it wasn't until like a 1.5 or 2 years ago when I started a YouTube channel, and I started putting out more of my own music. I had this terrible habit of putting out music under loads of different aliases and then thinking that's not my best work and deleting it from the internet altogether. And I just realized 2 years ago, like, I'm constantly starting again. People will always, if I run into old friends, like always unsure if I was still doing music, like, oh, I don't see your stuff anymore. Do you still do that? I had so many different names and monikers that I made music under, and I thought, right, let's just decide on something. We'll put music out there, and I don't want to be tied down to a genre, but I want my discography to just be a portfolio of growth, if nothing else. Wow. And I started the YouTube channel, and like I said, I was teaching alongside, and I slowly began to realize that my students were spending more and more time watching my videos and engaging with the content, commenting on the videos, and less time in my lectures. I'd be like, where's Josh today? And they're like, oh, he's out. And then I get a notification during my lecture, and he's like, well, this video's sick. Can you talk about sidechain compression, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, this is going to a place where I can probably focus more on online education and less in person. Outdated. That was the thing that really I had kind of a gripe with, was that the content that I was delivering inside college at that time, for that particular college. I'm sure there's an amazing colleges, universities, high schools all around the world, but that particular one, it was outdated, and I couldn't deliver the content that I found exciting and beneficial. And I don't think the students were getting the content that they felt would give them growth. So March, was it 2019, 2020? Everything feels like a blur now. Whenever we went into lockdown, lockdown came around, and I was like, okay, this has got to be. It took a gamble, but this has got to be the hardest time to maybe quit my job and just try this freelance thing. But if I can make a success of it right now in this pandemic, I set a little bit of money aside for a couple of months. Then I should be good. And dude, touch wood, it's been okay so far. It's been pretty good.
I definitely want to go back, and first off, man, I commend you for just everything that you've done, because this is hard work, and I think that, at least for myself, 10, 15, 20 years ago even, when I first got the idea of I want to be in music, it seemed like all glitz and glamour and the key to solving my life's problems and making life super easy, right? And that's kind of the the other side of the coin. Of course, the first side was falling in love with music and starting to play the guitar when I was like 9 years old, and then getting into hip hop heavy and just falling in love with the culture. But aside from that, the reason why I personally wanted to pursue music for some time was, this is something I'm passionate about, and this is going to be something that's going to make life easy. Kind of interjecting a little bit about my story here, not to take away from your shine, but as somebody who lives in Florida as an immigrant, there weren't a lot of options and opportunities for, at least that I felt, for someone like myself. And the people that I saw and looked up to were, these rappers that literally came from nothing and made it into something, or at least seemingly so, right? So seeing that in your journey, you were working a full-time job, right? You were working 7 hours a day, still building your music business, because that's what you were doing. You were building your client base at a studio. You're trying to build your client base at a studio, hopping into online sales, right? Your product, you're packaging your product. You're trying to sell it online, even if it's a digital product. Then quickly pivoting and seeing what worked and what didn't work, what you had personally, at least, were more in tune with and what you weren't. And then from there realizing that, hey, I'm pretty good at this teaching thing. I think that this process can be improved, but I don't have the freedom within the walls of this institution to do so. Let me explore that creativity outside of these four walls, and then seeing success with that. And that speaks volumes, right? I think that, again, it's not easy, and it's not going to be easy. It's hard work and it's dedication. Also, the creative aspect for you was crucial in being able to pivot. And you say, you're ditching things here and there, but I think you're really going into that uncomfortable realm with putting out your music, because it's such a personal. It's such a personal space for any artist to put, their heart and soul out there for the public to see. So, I commend you for that. And then finally deciding to commit to something and stick to it when you saw that this might be something worthwhile sticking to. And now you've seen the fruits of your labor. And by no means are you saying like, hey, everything's made, I'm driving a Bentley out here and living the lavish dream, but you are living a dream, and most people's dream is to go full time into music. So that's huge, man. And I wanted to bring those key elements out, because again, I don't want any of this to get lost in the sauce, and people to misinterpret what the artist's journey actually looks like, because it's not spoken about too much from the vantage point of independent artists who are, still working hard to make their dreams come true. So now you've structured your business, essentially, is what I'm hearing. You've structured your business around instruction, and you're still making music. So it's still kind of the same components of what you were doing before as an instructor and at your old college and working at the studio. But now you're working on your own terms.
Correct.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because now you're, in my eyes at least, you're a full-fledged music entrepreneur, right? Talk to me a bit about how that looks like on a day-to-day basis for you, and what are some of the struggles, but also what are some of the things that you really love about the space that you're in right now?
So this is interesting, because that's your words. You said fully fledged music entrepreneur. And I think just because you said about the things that I struggle with, the things that I enjoy, we'll come back to the day-to-day. I think this is really interesting. I'd like to ask you the same question. Titles. I find it so hard to title myself, right? I spent 10 years, or it was the reason I left the college, or one of the reasons I left the college, was because I didn't want to be there. It was supposed to be a stepping stone. I didn't want to be there 10 years. I've been in a job a decade. So coming up to the 10th year, I quit. But that's an easy thing to... Will Hatton, the teacher. Will Hatton works at, I was going to say the name, but a particular college, Go to the doctors. Yeah, I'm a teacher, blah, blah, blah. I went to the doctor's office for something minor when I got out of teaching, and you write down, occupation. And I was like, oh no. So to go back, we can go back to the day-to-day, and we can go back to the things that I struggle and enjoy with on the day-to-day. I think that's really interesting. But let me ask you the same question. Do you find it difficult to title yourself and to kind of package yourself to the person who's asking everything that you do? What do you call yourself?
Yeah, man, it's hard. I think it depends on who I'm speaking to. It depends on the platform. I'm a very carefully crafted person, and I've had to be for so much of my life, because I've had to compartmentalize so much of my life. At school, I'm Nick. At school, I was Nick. At home, I'm Nico. To my parents, I'm their son. To my wife, I'm a husband. So I view it as in relation to the other person. So what do I title myself in relation to the other person? Or the audience, or whoever I'm speaking to. I'm on stage, I'm a rapper. I'm home, I'm dad. So to your point, yeah, it's very difficult to appeal to everyone on a mass level, and to say that I'm this, I'm that, and I'm this, I'm that. I mean, I know this is really stupid, but I've struggled with coming up with a good Instagram bio, and like a good little short bio for like YouTube, right? Like, who am I? What am I? Like, all these labels. It is kind of daunting. But now I've come to terms with, well, what's the platform and what am I using it for? And then focus on that. And that's just a marketing piece, right? Because at the end of the day, and I hate to reduce this as brands or products, but in a sense, if you're trying to provide some sort of value and extract some monetary compensation, there's that exchange that occurs. And if you're basically selling through your services and your products, people are hooked to you as the brand, unless you're a faceless product or faceless service, which you're not, you are the brand. So all that said, trying to package it in a palatable way, in a way where it's tangible, I think it is important. And I think it's based on the platform. But to answer your question, man, yes, I've definitely had a hard time labeling myself, for sure. And
I know you've got some questions lined up for me. Can I put you under the microscope one more time? Because I think this is
man, go for it.
An interesting conversation that may or may not have come up in the podcast before. So you're speaking on being these essentially different identities, or at least titles, for the person that you're speaking to. And it sounds like more so for the benefit of that person, so they can understand your dislikes, your interests, or whether you can just converse and get along. Are you going to have a business relationship, that kind of thing? So I have kind of two questions, and they're linked. Do you think that, do you find that exhausting? And secondly, do you find that a link from being an immigrant and the way that you came up? Do you carry that with you still? Do I find it exhausting, to answer your first question? Not really, and here's why. I think that it's exhausting to constantly overexert and overshare, and to pour out every aspect of my life at every moment to every person, right? So when I'm with my employer, because I do work a full-time job, when I'm with my employer, I'm not going on about my children and the mess that this last week was, with all of them being sick, and going into the intricacies of parenthood, or even just the challenges of being a young married couple and dealing with finances and talking about those things. Like, those are conversations I reserve for my wife. And in the same vein, I'm not talking to my wife about the complexities of risk management and finding. I mean, I'll share with her tidbits, and same thing with my employer. Like, when the opportunity arises, sure, I'll get personal every now and again. But there's not this constant overexertion to overshare and to make everything known publicly, right? One thing that I did struggle with early on when I was 19, 20 is because I was so accustomed to writing everything on pen pad as a rapper and just pouring my heart on my sleeve, to my own detriment. It was a situation where I realized that I didn't have appropriate boundaries with people, meaning that I didn't establish, based on their hierarchy or their relation to my life, what is appropriate for me to wrap them in and what's not. And I went to
I've gone to counseling and therapy before, and I went to a session, and the guy showed me kind of like this I forgot what he called it. I think it was like intimacy circle, right? And he showed the people closest to you, they're in this circle, and then, you know, you go from this to like your friends and then your acquaintances and so on and so forth. And the further out you get, you know, of the orbit, the less you share, or perhaps the more reserved you are and whatnot. And I'm oversimplifying that, but all that said, I found that to be beneficial for me and just in my own personal life, and then applying that to business and to music and to everything else. I found that in a sense, it's actually freeing, right? It's freeing because I still get to share, just like I'm talking to you right now, something very personal about my life, which is music and my dreams and my hopes and my aspirations. And I enjoy that, right? But I'm not dumping everything else on you, right? And so I don't think it's exhausting in that sense. I do think that sometimes I can be a little too, and I think this is with every artist perhaps, a little too self-conscious and a little too insecure to a degree, where I'm like, oh, should I have said that? Should I, and that can be exhausting. Yeah. But in the sense of trying to kind of, abide by certain labels and whatnot. I don't think so, man. It's been freeing. And I forgot the second part of your question. I think it had to do with being an immigrant.
Yeah, I think
if that's
maybe
tied to that.
Maybe you answered it in that, but I wondered if the keeping yourself for particular individuals had anything to do with the difficulties of you growing up and just trying to, firstly, once you've found music and wanting to follow your dreams in that, and then perhaps the pressures your parents put you under of, dude, you gotta get some money. So I wondered if any of that played a part in it, but you've answered it a little bit. Can you speak on that more?
Yeah. I think I'm fortunate. My parents, and there's different, immigrant journeys and struggles. Like my wife is Indian, so I think, and not to overgeneralize or stereotype by any means, sure, but she'll say it herself, and I'm just echoing her sentiments. The Asian parent differs from at least my parents, right. And I don't want to speak for the entire Latino experience or the entire Asian experience, but there's certain expectations that are had with an Asian parent, at least from her vantage point, than my parents. And so, to your point, were my parents expecting me to get a certain income or bring certain amounts of money? No, like they were very, very supportive of my dreams and my aspirations. They came here for that, right? The land of the dreams, right? And pursuing the American dream. For her, it was different. It was very much like, go get a good career, go get get financially stable. That's your dream, right? And I've taken from both cultures and the positives and trying to meld them into that. But yeah, I think being an immigrant has provided me a unique experience, bringing it back and hooking it to the music world, in that I'm able to speak to different audiences in different ways, right? So growing up, it was very difficult to find a sense of identity with that bicultural background that I had, going home, speaking Spanish, eating Spanish food, Colombian food at that, having cultural customs that followed me only at home, and then going back to school and seeing how that differed and feeling alienated from the larger group. But then realizing that I can quickly adapt, and that adaptability factor as an artist, I think it's crucial. And you've talked about that, how you were able to adapt in becoming an instructor and being an instructor to those people who needed you there, but you're also still in your element in the background, still working on your tracks, and at the same time you're going to the studio and providing a service there. I think we all do that. I think we're just not as conscious as some of us are, maybe because we struggled with it a little bit more in the beginning of finding that identity in that place of being. But I'm assuming here, and I'm only speaking from my personal perspective. So,
dude, that's beautiful. I think I can loop back to an earlier question that you asked about kind of the day-to-day struggles, the things that I enjoy, and I think a mutual thing that sounds like you're better adapted to now, and you've understood the landscape better and where your comfort level lies. But something that's still fresh to me and a struggle on the daily is over trusting, not necessarily being maybe, and I still am, but not necessarily being too emotional as a musician or an artist, but too trusting of people. The glass is way over half full for me. I think that if I have an idea, that it's probably, there's probably a way to work that idea out for the better, which of course isn't always the case. You fall on your butt a lot. And I think a lot of the times, because I'm a growing brand or a growing identity and I'm fresh in the freelance game, I tend to reach out to a lot of people, whether it be people that I want to collaborate with, one-off sponsors, whatever it be. I'll reach out, and these people are years in the game. They've been doing this thing for maybe more than a decade, and I can be too trusting of some of the business language that's used, and I can say to friends, my girlfriend, whoever, like, yeah, this person's like really looking out for me. I think they're really gonna like have my back on this thing, and they're gonna take me where maybe they'll bring me into the company a little bit more. And then friends and colleagues and partners will bring me back down to earth every so often, and they say, the glass half full thing, the optimism thing is like a huge superpower to have, because a lot of people don't have that or might be more pessimistic. But I think on the daily, a huge struggle is firstly over trusting too many people, and then in the quiet moments having doubts about those relationships, and am I working with people, or are those people working with me for the right reasons? Because over the last year, we're both DIY artists, and the beauty of the indie artist is the fact that it can happen like at any moment. And for me, that was with kind of the start of the journey was with throwaway work. I was working on a bunch of tunes, and my collaborator, Rebecca Mardle, she sent me some guitar, and we wrote maybe 4, 5, 6 tunes over that period of time at the start of the pandemic. And this was like a throwaway idea. I think this is fine, but like do something with it. She was like, dude, it's great. Yeah, let's put it out. And that became Afternoon Tea. That was the tune that, it very quickly went from 0 to 1 million streams and is still growing now.
Wow.
And to go back to the trusting thing, to go back to speaking to other professionals, I'm slowly learning that I have something that I can bring to the table that is of benefit to other people. So I have to be careful of, like you say, how much I share, how much of myself do I give over? Do I just keep it completely business orientated? Here's the price for X thing, and it will be done by this deadline. Or do I put a little bit more into it? Well, I really created this idea, which stemmed way back when I had a job as a teacher, and I got into teaching because this, that, and the other. And I've hiccuped a couple of times and worked with, some not so great collaborators. But I think, again, that's the beauty of the journey, right? Is that I'm learning. Everything goes back to education for me. Being an educator is a huge passion, and being able to teach people different things. But I absolutely soak up education like a sponge. And I really enjoy some of those moments where I trip and fall and then figure out like, okay, I'm going to get back up, but I'm going to be a little bit more wary over this person or this route, that kind of thing. So yeah, a little bit of struggle, a little bit of the things that I enjoy on the daily there.
And I definitely don't want to gloss over the fact that you hit 1 million streams, man. I mean, that's bonkers to me. And on your live sessions, you've seen success there, and talk, before you talk about the numbers there, I mean, just highlighting a couple things. You're definitely not the only one. My wife read a book recently, and it was an audiobook, so I guess she listened to it technically, but I forgot the title, and I wish I remembered it. But the basic premise was, I think it was called Speaking with Strangers or something like that, is what it was titled, is that we as humans default to trusting people, and how that can oftentimes lead to a disadvantage where, people take advantage, people have done crazy things, and I think he mentioned a couple stories here and there where people were manipulated or so on and so forth. And all that being said, I mean, I've experienced something similar myself, both within music and outside of music. But I think that default, and we ask ourselves that, and kind of sociologists and psychologists look at it from that lens, is like, why is that still a default? And I think to our advantage more so than our disadvantage, because it gives us that opportunity to work with people and to kind of be part of that wolf pack and to be part of a community where alone we as individuals don't thrive. And we've seen that in the pandemic, in the shutdowns, how mental health and things of that nature have, like very much deteriorated when we are in isolation. So I definitely don't want to, I would like to actually commend you for being trusting and for being half glass full. And now that you are aware of, okay, now I have some leverage, I'm in a position where this could affect my livelihood. There's business language that I'm not familiar with. Of course, there's that territory that you have to encroach upon with a different, not attitude, but I would say just a different strategy altogether than as if you were approaching a friend. One thing that I like to do, and I'm not saying that this is the right way to do things, is just having an opportunity to get to know the person first, because I'm more interested in the long-term game than the short-term input and output from that exchange, right? And sometimes you need that. I mean, I'm not saying that that's always the case where it's always going to be long-term. And what I mean by that is building partnerships that you can count on for 10, 15, 20 years, especially if you're trying to do this long term, than just having that one quick, oh, maybe this person's going to give me that, open that door for me, and I can climb on to the next thing. Because then at that point in time, at least speaking for myself, it becomes about utilitarianism and using that person versus actually creating that bridge for both mutually benefit from. But you mentioned that with your single, Afternoon Tea, it's not like you were prepared, but was there something that you think you did as opposed to maybe other tracks that propelled this song to the million stream mark?
I think the timing of it was kind of a perfect storm. And obviously looking back in retrospect, because I don't think I was totally armed with the knowledge at the time, and I knew exactly which step that I was going to take. Like it was a game of chess. I created a song in the pandemic with somebody like yourself that became a friend online, and she was hopefully, I don't think she would mind me saying this because she's spoken about it before, but I believe she was either in between housing or she was actually homeless at the time. And so she sent me an idea, and I kind of wrote to that, and it was Christmas time or around that time. So I just wrote it with a kind of warmth, kind of minor key, kind of solemn track. And when we pitched it quite honestly as two friends that have never met, that worked on this track together across an ocean with the same perspective of the pandemic from our windowsill. This was before we could go outside and do our hours daily exercise or whatever on that crazy like 2-week or 4-week lockdown. I don't know how it was for you, but we had this period of time where it was like no going outside. We pitched it on Spotify for Artists that way with that paragraph. I knocked up some artwork like super quick, and then I think it kind of kicked in when it got to like maybe 250,000, 500,000, something like that, where I was like, this is different to other songs that I've put out. But it was interesting.
Let me pause you right there.
Sure.
When you pitched it to Spotify for Artists, did you guys land a editorial playlist? Is that what happened?
Correct. Yeah, I completely left that out. Didn't include that in the story. Hugely beneficial. Yeah, so I think the song, we pitched it to Spotify for Artists I want to say 2 months before the release of the song, which is obviously
huge.
Crucial. Maybe it's not obvious to some of the listeners, but as far out as you can do it to your release date, the better. So I was, a lot of my, again, this speaks on how I viewed myself as an artist. A lot of my other material, I finished it, I was excited about it, I put it out the next day. I hopped onto DistroKid, another pro of DistroKid, just being able to put your music out when you want to, even if it's, the next day a lot of times. But it's not super beneficial in terms of a business mindset. So forward thinking, I'm working with somebody else that is in arguably, a worse position than me, but with the very same dream of doing music. And I was like, cool, let's sit on this and we'll put it out in a couple of months. And so took time with Spotify for artists. I don't think we even got the notification that it was on Spotify for artists before the tune came out. I think it was after the tune came out that we got the notification, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So they hadn't listened to it. And I spent some time with Submit Hub as well. So I was putting 10, 20 pounds on Submit Hub and just pushing that towards blogs and Spotify playlisters, that kind of thing. But of course, the Spotify, I think it was on and is still on the Spotify Lo-Fi Beats playlist, which is super strange because it's like there's a lot of musicians on there, Flying Lotus, Jay Dilla, people that you and I and loads of other producers and artists like look up to. And then there's this kid from Southend-on-Sea just in there with his mate.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it hit Spotify, it hit the curated playlist, and that definitely helped springboard it into the numbers that it's at today.
Man, and I want to give you credit because as much as the Spotify curated playlist did for you, you guys did all the legwork in the forefront. And you mentioned that this is a common struggle as far as I've seen from the network of artists that I've worked with, is that there is no strategy behind a release, and minimum of 4 weeks is necessary to prep your release and really get it ready for the masses. This is going back to that label question that you had for me, and I think that it is to our own advantage when we start labeling ourselves as music entrepreneurs, because if we look at it from the lens of, well, what does an entrepreneur do? Let's talk about the business side of things, as much as we hate it oftentimes in the creative circles that we're a part of and the atmosphere that we surround ourselves in. Think of like big brand names like, Apple with the recent iPhone 13 release. Like this is quarters in the making, a couple months in the making, where from the product to product testing to branding, imaging, marketing, all that stuff is already prepped for and planned for months in advance. I'm not sure who the head of product management is for the iPhone, but it's not like they thought of like, exactly. iPhone 13, let's drop it tomorrow, right? We do that to our own detriment as artists. And I think that there's a lot to say there behind, hey, I took 2 months before releasing this track. We did our due diligence, and look what it it produced, the fruits that it produced. And obviously that's not going to be the case for everyone, but the more you can increase your favor or increase the probability of things like that happening, the better. And I think that comes with planning and preparation. You went on Spotify for Artists, you pitched it, you used Submit Hub. So there's that marketing element again, which doesn't take a lot of work, but it is sometimes it's monotonous work that we don't like to do. But you did it anyway, and it's paid off. And now you're above and beyond the 1 million stream mark. Has that changed you as an artist and how you approach music? Has that changed how you approach your business and kind of tying it back to that whole, I'm too trusting of people, but now I have something to bring to the table? What has that done for your journey?
I think I think as much as I wouldn't like to admit it, it's brought me into a new circle. I think people have paid attention to that number. It's not something that I like to keep tabs on. It's not how I choose my collaborators or my friends or things like that. On a more real level, on a lower level, not a lower level, but more emotional level, you know, people, when it hit 1 million, and I gave it a little share, people started reaching out. People from my past, maybe we went to school together, maybe we worked together back in the day. A lot of people that do music, and you know, hey, I noticed that you're doing good with music. Yeah, are you still? Yeah, cool. Yeah. If you ever want to collab sometime, we can, you know, we should get. And I you know, that kind of hit me. I got a little bit emotional about that, because I was just thinking, like, well, you know, I hit X and Y and Z person up years ago, before I did any of this, and I ultimately only got lucky with this. This could be the only million. You know, there might be more. And there were some people that I really, really looked up to, and, you know, text left on read, you know. So there was some people in my life that reached out and they said, hey, you got 1 million, we should collab. And I had to put myself in check and, like, okay, I could, you know, I can be bitter about this, and no, you weren't there. You don't know. We're not friends. But there was some people that I was like, you know what, this has allowed me, that was like an audition. You know, maybe who was I to think that I could be at the level of these people, even though they were from around my ways, whatever. You know, I looked up to them because of the level of their musicianship or the production, whatever. So there was a couple of people that, you know, I put myself in check, and I was like, cool, I've passed the audition, and they see that I can maybe just even be in the same creative space. And then I think things have changed a little bit, not loads, but for opportunities moving forward. 1 million is a very, for lack of a better word, like a malleable number that I can use as leverage when speaking to other brands. It has people show interest. So something that I do often is stream on Reddit, and I do that twice a week. And I think in the early days, it was like 4,000 people, which I was gassed about. I was just like super taken aback that 4,000 people would sit down across an hour and listen to my music. And then as I passed 1 million streams on Spotify, more and more people were paying attention to the live streams of, like, who's this artist? And he's on everything right now. He's doing Instagram, Reddit, he's doing the Spotify thing. I am putting out tracks like monthly. So now the Reddit streams have become 1 million every week. There's 1 million people that tune in for an hour, which is insane. Like, it's a lot of pressure as well. Which I obviously try to suppress that pressure a little bit and try not to think about it. Because it's like, it becomes like a why me thing, and I'm just making music. I'm making the same beats that I was making before 1 million. But yeah, those couple of things have changed. The pressure of creating, and can I hold that audience? That's changed a little bit.
You definitely have shown the beautiful part about the journey, right? And the struggles, and kind of just walking us through everything from starting in high school, picking up an instrument out of kind of just not desperation, but just this want to be good at something, and finding that, to eventually, you know, going full time with music and having 1 million people, stream your song and view your streams, as say that 5 times fast. And, you know, that's encouraging, man, because it's going to take time. It's going to take time, 10 years plus for you. And certainly I'm still on that journey myself. And I haven't hit the milestones that you have, but at the same time, I consider myself lucky to be in the position that I'm in as well. And I ask myself the same question, why me? And I realize that it's not about, at least for me, it's not about me being better than, or having this be kind of my thing that I deserved and am entitled to, but using whatever thing that I have access to that other people don't have to help them along the way, or serve other people along the way, even if it's just a handful. It doesn't have to be a mass audience or a mass amount of people, right? And so doesn't necessarily entitle me to be someone's key to success or make me better in any way, shape, or form. It's just it just loops back, right? It just loops back, at least for me. So I see that that's what you're doing with how you are managing your business, how you're so approachable, and even though we haven't personally met in the physical world, we've had conversations offline that have encouraged me. The ways that you ask questions, the manners in which you approach things, I think it's very needed in this industry where there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of reservation, there's a lot of just me, myself, and I, and you look out, man. So thank you for that. I want to leave it at that because there's a lot of good stuff here in this podcast that I want people to digest, and I certainly want there to be an opportunity for us to talk again.
Absolutely.
Even in and out of this format, for sure. Outside of this format, it definitely will happen, but in this format as well. So for the audience, and I'm sure the people watching this have hopefully already heard of your music, but where can they find everything that you put out, and what's the best way for them to get in touch with you in case or event they want to learn from you?
So ultimately, to find the huge list of all of the things, all of the pies that I have my fingers in, just willhattonmusic.com. And from there you'll find the music that I make under the moniker Hush Child, and you'll find my educational YouTube series inspired by as well as email, Discord that you can join, Twitch, all the streams that we spoke about. There's a whole host of goodies there. willhattonmusic.com.
Will, it was a pleasure speaking with you, my brother. I consider you a brother from afar. Thank you for sharing your journey and your wisdom and opening up to us, to myself, from where you've been and where you are now. I really commend Will for his, not his accomplishments, but who he is and what he brings to the table as a person, more importantly. And his music is just phenomenal, guys. Like, listen to it. I guarantee it. You will fall in love with it. I have. And to each and every one of the DIY artists on here or that are listening, be encouraged. It's going to take time. You'll hit some roadblocks, as you've heard. Certainly not everyone's out to get you, but certainly not everyone's looking out for you either. So keep that in mind. Those are some of my takeaways from today's conversation. If you like this podcast, if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, family, whoever is in the industry or wanting to be in the industry, the music business at least. And that's it for me, guys. Thank you again. Much love, Will. And yeah, I'll catch you guys.